What if I told you that the guy driving that dusty, like 6-year-old Ford F-150 next to you at a red light is actually a multimillionaire?
Right.
And the guy, revving the engine in the brand new leased luxury SUV right beside him is secretly completely broke.
Oh yeah, drowning in debt. It happens all the time.
Right. We just have this collective hallucination in our society about what wealth actually looks like. And I mean, more importantly, how it's acquired.
We really do. We're constantly searching for this strictly mathematical formula.
Yeah, like it's a spreadsheet problem. We think getting rich is just, X amount of salary minus Y amount of expenses, and that magically equals Z amount of wealth.
Exactly. Or we think it requires like an Ivy League degree or a massive tech exit or hitting the lottery.
But today, if you're listening to this, we are throwing the financial spreadsheet completely out the window. Welcome to the deep dive.
It is entirely necessary to throw that spreadsheet out. Because, well, the math is actually the easy part. It's the human operating system that causes all the glitches.
And fixing that operating system is our mission today. We are delivering a comprehensive masterclass on the hidden mechanics of financial independence.
Because there's a truth here that's, frankly, a little uncomfortable for a lot of people to hear.
Oh, absolutely. It's confronting. The reality is that getting wealthy is almost entirely about behavioral psychology. It's about invisible habits and tiny, consistent choices that compound over decades.
And we really brought the receipts for this one. We're synthesizing a massive stack of sources today.
We really are. We're looking at the foundational behavioral insights from James Clear's Atomic Habits.
Right, and we're pulling the overarching philosophical framework from Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money.
Plus, we've got Thomas Corley's rigorous demographic data from his Rich Habits research. And we're pairing that with the classic, just paradigm-shifting data from Thomas Stanley and William Danko's The Millionaire Next Door.
Not to mention the actionable modern strategies from personal finance experts like Humphrey Yang and the strategists at Ellux.
Yeah, along with the institutional risk management insights from Rathbones and Investment Quorum. We are putting all of this together to give you the ultimate behavioral blueprint. Okay, let's unpack this.
What's up?
Because before we can even begin to talk about what to do with our money, which index funds to buy, or how to allocate a portfolio, or how to cut Dirk on lattes, we have to look at who we are when we make those financial decisions.
Strategy without self-awareness is just a recipe for self-sabotage.
Exactly.
And that is really the crucial starting line. If we look at Morgan Housel's core premise in The Psychology of Money, he makes this profound, almost countercultural argument.
Yeah, what does he say?
He states that success with money has very little to do with how smart you are, or your IQ, or your technical financial skill.
Really? Just right out the gate, IQ doesn't matter.
Right. He says it has almost entirely to do with your behavior, your patience, and your perspective.
Wow.
He points out that finance is one of the only fields where a person with no formal education, no background, and no connections can massively outperform someone with a Harvard MBA.
Just by behaving better.
Simply by exhibiting better behavioral control over a long period of time. You can be an absolute genius who loses everything because, well, you lack emotional regulation during a market downturn.
Oh, I've seen that happen. Panic selling.
Exactly. And you can be a totally average earner, like a janitor or a secretary who builds a multi-million-dollar fortune simply through disciplined, unflashy behavior.
I mean, that totally levels the playing field for all of us, but it also, it totally removes our excuses.
It does. You can't blame the system if it's about your own habits.
Which brings us right to James Clear, because if wealth is fundamentally about behavior rather than intelligence, the immediate question is, how do we actually change our behavior?
Like not just for a week, right? But for a lifetime.
Exactly. Clear breaks this down into his 3 layers of behavior change. So if you're listening, I want you to imagine this like a target with 3 concentric circles.
Okay, a target.
The outermost layer, like the thinnest ring, is outcomes. That's your results. That's a person saying, I want to have $1 million in my investment account.
Right, the goal itself.
Yeah. Then the middle layer is your process. That's your habits and your systems. That's saying, I am going to automatically transfer 20% of my income into an index fund every single month.
Which is better, but still not the core.
Right, because the innermost layer, the deep bullseye, is your identity. That's your beliefs, your worldview, your actual self-image.
What's fascinating here is how the tragic flaw in how most humans approach self-improvement, whether it's financial or otherwise, is that they work from the outside in.
They start with the outcome.
Exactly. They fixate on the $1 million. Then they try to cobble together a process to reach it, but they never address the bullseye.
They never change who they are.
Right. True. Lasting behavior change has to start from the identity and work its way outward. If you want to accumulate wealth, but you secretly, deep down, identify as a high consumer.
Like your internal narrative is, I'm the kind of person who deserves luxury.
Yeah, or I'm a big spender, it's just who I am. If you believe that, you are setting yourself up for an unwinnable war.
Claire uses this incredible analogy that just locked the concept in for me, the smoker analogy.
Oh, this is a great one.
Right. So imagine two people who are both trying to quit smoking. Someone walks up to the first person and offers them a cigarette. The first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit."
Which sounds completely reasonable.
On the surface, yeah, it sounds like a perfectly healthy response. But look at the language. It's entirely outcome-focused. They still fundamentally believe their identity is a smoker.
They're just a smoker who is currently painfully trying to restrict themselves from doing the thing they are fundamentally wired to do.
Exactly. Now, the second person is offered a cigarette, and they simply say, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker."
The psychological weight of that tiny shift in phrasing is monumental.
It changes everything.
That second person has rewritten their self-image. They no longer identify as someone who smokes, which means turning down the cigarette doesn't require willpower.
It's simply an expression of who they already are.
Right. And when we map this onto personal finance, it unlocks the entire puzzle. If your internal narrative is that you are a spender, any attempt to save money is going to trigger what psychologists call identity conflict.
Identity conflict, so like fighting your own brain.
Yeah. You might force yourself to stick to a strict budget for 3 months using sheer white-knuckled willpower. But willpower is a finite resource. It's a battery that drains.
And eventually the battery dies.
Exactly.
Well.
And your actions will violently regress to match your identity. You will go on a massive spending binge. You'll sabotage your savings, all subconsciously, just to resolve that internal friction.
Just to prove to yourself that you are who you think you are. Because your brain is essentially screaming, "Hey, wait a minute, we are the fun, big spending people. Why are we hoarding this cash in a boring index fund?"
Right, let's go buy a watch. Let's book a first-class flight.
Yeah. The brain craves congruence between what we do and who we believe we are.
Congruence is the perfect word for it. Behavior that is incongruent with the self will never last. You have to change the underlying belief first.
But how?
Well, here's the critical mechanism. You don't just wake up on a random Tuesday, look in the mirror, and magically believe you're a disciplined wealth builder.
Right. You can't just manifest it by staring really hard at your reflection.
Exactly. Belief doesn't happen by sheer force of imagination. Cleary argues that habits are simply evidence of your identity. You don't start out as a saver. You become one by accumulating evidence.
Okay, so every action counts.
Every single time you transfer $50 into a brokerage account, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant the amount, you are casting a vote for the type of person you want to become.
You're building a case file.
You are building a case file of evidence that proves to your brain, I am a person who delays gratification.
I love that. The idea of casting a vote. But I actually have to push back on this framework just a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because if I look at almost every other personal finance book out there, every corporate leadership seminar, every motivational speaker, the central thesis is always about setting massive financial goals.
Set a SMART goal.
Yeah. Set a goal to save 100 grand. Set a SMART goal to retire by 55. If we are supposed to focus on identity and daily evidence, are goals actually counterproductive? Like, are we supposed to just abandon goal setting entirely?
It's a nuanced distinction, but a really vital one. Goals aren't inherently bad, but their utility is vastly overestimated in our culture. Clear points out a glaring logical fallacy in relying solely on goals.
Which is?
Winners and losers often have the exact same goals.
Oh, wow. That's true.
Every athlete at the Olympic trials has the goal of winning the gold medal. Every candidate interviewing for the executive position has the goal of getting the job.
So the goal doesn't set them apart.
Right. If both the successful and the unsuccessful people share the identical goal, then the goal itself cannot be the differentiating factor that drives success. Goals set the direction. They give you a compass heading so you aren't wandering in the woods.
But it's the systems.
It's the systems. The daily processes, the unsexy, repetitive habits, that is what actually generates the forward motion.
That makes a lot of sense. I like to think of it like this. Goals are the steering wheel, but systems are the engine.
That's a great analogy.
You can sit in your driveway staring at the steering wheel, gripping it tightly, turning it left and right, visualizing your destination all day long. But you won't move a single inch without an engine actually firing on all cylinders underneath the hood.
And if you focus entirely on the outcome, you're just staring at the destination on a map without ever building the vehicle required to traverse the terrain.
Exactly. It's just wishful thinking.
Furthermore, relying purely on goals creates a very toxic relationship with your own happiness and self-worth. It creates a perpetual either-or conflict.
What do you mean?
The mindset becomes, once I reach my goal of $1 million, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be successful. Until then, I am in a state of failure.
Oh, that's exhausting.
It is. But a systems-first mentality, rooted in identity, allows you to fall in love with the process itself. If your identity is, I am someone who lives below my means and invests the difference, you succeed every single day you execute that system.
You win today.
You win today, regardless of what the macroeconomic environment is doing, regardless of a market correction, and regardless of what your exact net worth happens to be on a given Thursday. You decouple your emotional stability from a distant, arbitrary number.
Okay, so what does this all mean for how wealth actually looks in the real world? Because if true wealth is rooted in this internal behavioral identity, this quiet, system-driven confidence, rather than a desperate, noisy desire to look wealthy to other people,
Right.
then the people who actually have accumulated significant capital must look incredibly different from what society expects them to look like. The camouflage of wealth must be fascinating.
Oh, the camouflage is almost absolute. And to understand it, we have to completely deconstruct the myth of the flashy millionaire.
The guy in the luxury SUV.
Exactly. Modern society, fueled largely by social media and marketing algorithms, has force-fed us an image of wealth that is essentially just high-end consumption.
We conflate wealth with luxury cars, designer logos, massive sprawling estates, and constant exotic travel.
We see someone spending money, and we assume they have money. But the empirical data tells a radically, almost comically, different story.
This is where we dive into the millionaire next door data. And honestly, reading through this research completely rewired my brain.
It's eye-opening.
When Thomas Stanley and William Danko actually went out and conducted massive nationwide surveys of actual American millionaires, and we're talking about people with a verified net worth of over $1 million US, not just high incomes.
Right. Actual accumulated wealth.
They found that the statistical average millionaire does not fit the Hollywood casting call at all. The average millionaire is usually a man or woman in their 50s.
They have typically been married to the same person for decades.
Yeah, and they live in remarkably average middle-class neighborhoods. They aren't living in gated mega mansions. They are living 3 doors down from you in a 3-bedroom ranch house.
And their spending habits actively defy the cultural script. The data reveals they are significantly more likely to buy a $40 pair of shoes than a $500 pair of shoes.
Which is wild when you think about influencer culture today.
Completely opposite. Over 25% of them haven't purchased a motor vehicle in 4 years. And when they do step onto a car lot, they overwhelmingly favor reliable, slightly used vehicles.
Like we mentioned at the very beginning, the most popular vehicle among actual millionaires in their extensive survey wasn't a Mercedes or a Porsche or a Range Rover. It was the Ford F-150 pickup truck. Only about a quarter of them own brand new cars of any make.
And a staggering 94% of the wealthy buy their vehicles outright or finance them traditionally, rather than leasing them to constantly upgrade to the newest model.
Okay, I have to pause here because the contrast is so jarring. The guy driving the dusty 6-year-old F-150 owns a multi-million-dollar portfolio, while the guy in the brand new leased luxury SUV might literally be living paycheck to paycheck.
Drowning in auto loans just to maintain an aesthetic.
We need to go deeper into the weeds here. For you listening who already understands the basics of saving, what is the actual structural financial mechanism that separates the stealthy millionaire from the high-earning but broke individual? Like, how does the math actually dictate this behavior?
You understand the mechanism, we need to explore the critical distinction between realized income and unrealized income.
Okay, realized versus unrealized.
This is the absolute dividing line between those who look rich and those who actually are wealthy. Realized income is the money you actually take home. It's the salary, the bonus, the cash that hits your checking account.
Right.
And crucially, realized income is the money that the government taxes.
Ah, right. Taxes.
Exactly. Unrealized income is wealth that grows silently without creating a taxable cash flow, like the appreciating value of an index fund portfolio, the rising equity in a piece of commercial real estate, or the growing valuation of a private business you own.
So if I buy a stock for $10 and it goes up to $50, I have $40 of unrealized income. I haven't sold it, so I haven't realized the gain, which means the tax man can't touch it.
Exactly. The foundational strategy of the truly wealthy is to minimize their realized income, thereby legally minimizing their tax burden to the absolute floor, and to relentlessly maximize their unrealized income, letting compound growth do the heavy lifting in a tax-sheltered or tax-deferred environment.
And this gets pretty extreme, right?
Oh, it's often taken to the extreme in advanced wealth management through a strategy colloquially known as buy, borrow, die.
Buy, borrow, die. I've heard whispers of this. Break this down for us, because this is where the system seems almost entirely decoupled from how the middle class operates.
It is a completely different paradigm. Step 1, buy. The wealthy individual buys appreciating assets, stocks, real estate, art. Over decades, those assets grow massively in value.
Okay, simple enough.
Now, a normal person who needs cash to buy a house or fund their lifestyle would sell some of those assets.
Yeah.
But selling triggers a capital gains tax.
Right, which eats into the wealth.
So step 2, borrow. Instead of selling the asset, the wealthy individual goes to a bank and takes out a securities-backed line of credit using their massive portfolio as collateral.
Oh, wow.
The bank loans them cash at a very low interest rate because the loan is virtually risk-free for the bank. They have the assets to back it up.
And the kicker here is that loan proceeds are not considered taxable income by the IRS, so they get millions in cash to live on, totally tax-free.
Precisely. They live on borrowed money, while their underlying assets continue to grow at a rate that far outpaces the low interest rate of the loan. Their wealth actually outruns their debt.
That's incredible. And then step 3.
Finally, step 3, die. When they pass away, their assets transfer to their heirs. Under current tax law, those assets receive what is called a step-up in basis. The theoretical taxable gain is totally wiped clean.
So the taxes just vanish?
The heirs inherit the portfolio at its current market value, use a small portion of it to pay off the bank loan, and keep the rest, having legally bypassed massive amounts of taxation over multiple generations.
That is just mind-bending, but it completely illuminates why the flashy, high-consumption lifestyle is such a trap.
It is a trap.
If your identity requires you to constantly buy expensive cars, designer wardrobes, and massive houses to signal your status, you cannot utilize strategies like this. You are forced to maximize your realized income just to generate the raw cash needed to pay the credit card bills and the lease payments.
Exactly.
You have to grind out a massive, highly taxed salary just to fund the illusion of being rich.
Which locks you onto what the sources refer to as the earn and consume treadmill. You might be a surgeon or a corporate lawyer earning $400,000 a year, but if your lifestyle burns through $390,000 a year,
You're barely breaking even.
you are fundamentally no closer to financial independence than someone earning $40,000 and spending $39,000. You are just running on a much more expensive, much more stressful treadmill.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Many high earners are shockingly asset poor. They are trapped in a cycle of spending tomorrow's money today, relying on constant high-stress labor to maintain a fragile facade.
To them, wealth is defined by what they spend.
But the mathematical reality, as Stanley and Danko painstakingly prove, is that wealth is defined exclusively by what you accumulate and retain.
It's like eating your seed corn instead of planting it for the harvest. You look really well fed today, you're enjoying a feast, but you are absolutely mathematically guaranteeing that you will starve tomorrow when the winter comes.
That's a brutal but accurate way to put it.
So, to bring this out of the theoretical and down to brass tacks for you listening who wants to step off that treadmill, how do we structure this? Thomas Corley's research provides a very specific baseline, the 80-20 rule.
Right, 80-20.
The wealthy structurally engineer their lives to live on 80% or less of their net income, and they automatically save and invest the remaining 20%.
And they achieve this by putting hard mathematical limits on their lifestyle inflation.
Yeah, the guidelines synthesized from our sources suggest keeping your total housing costs under 25% of your net pay. Food should be kept under 15%. And entertainment, which includes bars, movies, dining out, and vacations, must be capped under 10%.
You buy a reliable car you never lease, and you drive it until the wheels quite literally fall off.
It requires ruthless prioritization of your future self over your present desires.
And implementing that kind of ruthless prioritization requires a robust structural framework. Because knowing we need to be frugal, understanding the tax advantages of unrealized gains, and wanting to shift our identity That is all a beautiful, elegant philosophy.
But philosophy rarely survives contact with the enemy.
Exactly. And the enemy is a Tuesday afternoon when you are exhausted from work, your boss yelled at you, the kids are screaming, and you're tempted to just order expensive sushi on Uber Eats and buy something you don't need on Amazon just to feel a fleeting spike of comfort.
Right. You can't just rely on the myth of sheer willpower to guard your wallet in those moments. Willpower is fragile. We need to talk about the architecture of financial microhabits. Here's where it gets really interesting. How do we actually execute this 80-20 frugal identity on a daily basis when the world is constantly trying to separate us from our money?
We look to the 1% rule, formerly known in performance psychology as the aggregation of marginal gains. James Clear illustrates this perfectly with the story of the British cycling team.
Oh, this story is amazing.
It really is. For nearly a century, British cycling was the laughingstock of the athletic world. They were demonstrably mediocre. They had won exactly one gold medal since 1908.
One medal in a century.
And their performance in the Tour de France was so abysmal that top bicycle manufacturers actually refused to sell them gear because they feared it would hurt their brand image.
That is just humiliating.
Then they hired a new performance director named Dave Brailsford. Brailsford didn't look for one massive revolutionary change. He believed in a philosophy of searching for a tiny, seemingly insignificant 1% margin of improvement in absolutely every single thing they did.
They broke down the entire anatomy of riding a bike and looked for the microscopic optimizations.
Exactly. They redesigned the bike seats to make them slightly more comfortable. They rubbed specialized alcohol on the tires for a fraction of a percent better grip. They tested various massage gels on the riders to see which led to a microscopic improvement in muscle recovery.
I read they even brought in surgeons to teach the riders the optimal way to wash their hands.
Yes. To reduce the chance of catching a cold by 1%, they even tested different types of pillows and mattresses, found the one that led to the best sleep architecture, and transported those specific pillows to every hotel the team stayed in.
That is borderline obsessive. But what was the result of all these tiny tweaks?
It was an absolute paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Just 5 years after Brailsford took over, the British cycling team dominated the 2008 Olympic Games, winning 60% of the gold medals available.
Wow.
4 years later, they set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records.
Yeah.
That same year, a British rider won the Tour de France for the first time in history, and they went on to win it 5 times in 6 years.
The math behind this transformation is staggering, and it applies directly to compounding wealth. If you get just 1% better at something every day for a year, you don't just become 365% better.
Because the gains compound on top of the previous day's gains.
Right, so you actually become 37.78 times better by the end of the year. 37 times better. That is the power of exponential growth applied to behavior.
And Humphrey Yang, one of our personal finance sources, translates this perfectly into practical applications for your wallet.
Yeah, how does he apply it?
Getting 1% better with your money doesn't mean you have to spend hours analyzing balance sheets to find the next crypto moonshot or the next Apple. It means finding the financial equivalent of a better pillow.
Okay, I like that.
It means finding a way to save an extra $5 a day. It means auditing your subscriptions and cutting out one coffee shop visit a week. Crucially, it means automating your finances.
Automation is huge.
You set up a system where 10% of your paycheck is instantly routed to a brokerage account the second it hits your bank, before you ever even see the balance. It means logging your focused work hours to ensure you're actually building skills that increase your earning potential rather than just doing busy work.
The psychology of automation cannot be overstated. By automating your investments, you are entirely removing the human element and therefore the emotional friction from the equation. You don't have to make a conscious choice to save money every month.
Which means you don't have an opportunity to talk yourself out of it.
Exactly. But to build these tiny habits initially, Clear says you have to follow 4 fundamental laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying.
The 4 laws, right?
I want to really dig into the neuroscience of that second law, make it attractive, because this feels like the linchpin of why we spend money on things we don't need.
It absolutely is. The attractiveness of a habit is governed by the dopamine-driven feedback loop. Every single habit you have, whether it's checking your portfolio, biting your nails, or impulse buying online, follows a rigid 4-step pattern.
Cue, craving, response, and reward.
Yes. The cue is a trigger that initiates the behavior because it predicts a reward. The craving is the underlying motivational force. You have to understand, you don't crave the action itself. You crave the change in internal state that the action delivers.
So you're not craving the plastic item you bought, you're craving the feeling of getting it.
Exactly. The response is the actual behavior you perform, and the reward satisfies the craving, delivering a hit of dopamine.
Let me trace this path with a real-world example to make sure I have it. I'm scrolling Instagram, and I see an ad for a new pair of running shoes. That's the cue.
Right.
I immediately feel a desire to feel athletic, stylish, and admired by my peers. That's the craving.
Spot on.
I click the ad, add the shoes to my cart, and hit purchase using Apple Pay. That's the response.
The friction is almost zero there.
And then I get a quick burst of excitement and a confirmation screen. That's the reward.
That is the loop executed flawlessly by marketers. But here is the critical neurobiological insight that we have to understand if we want to take control of our behavior. Dopamine is not just released when you experience pleasure.
Okay.
It is released in massive quantities when you anticipate pleasure.
Oh, wow.
From an evolutionary perspective, this kept our ancestors alive. The anticipation of finding berries or hunting an animal kept them moving forward. In modern times, the anticipation of a reward often releases significantly more dopamine than the actual receipt of the reward itself.
Which explains so much of human behavior. It's why daydreaming about a vacation while you're sitting in your cubicle is sometimes actually more enjoyable than the stress of the actual vacation.
Yes.
Or why adding 7 items to an online shopping cart feels so incredibly good, but when the cardboard box actually arrives on your porch 3 days later, you open it and feel, well, kind of empty. The wanting is literally stronger than the liking.
The human brain has far more neural circuitry allocated for wanting rewards than for liking them. So to build good financial habits and break bad ones, we have to become neurohackers. We have to hijack this loop.
How do we do that?
We do this through tools like implementation intentions. This means stating explicitly what, when, and where you will perform a behavior. Instead of a foggy, easily abandoned goal like, I will try to save more money this month, you create a rigid structure.
I will log into my banking app and transfer exactly $50 to my high-yield savings account every Friday at 9 a.m. while sitting at my office desk.
Exactly. It leaves no room for debate.
And we can amplify this by stacking them. Habit stacking and temptation bundling. Habit stacking is when you tie a new desired habit to a current rock-solid established habit.
Give me an example.
After I pour my first cup of morning coffee, which is the established habit, I will immediately open my spending tracker app to review yesterday's transactions, the new habit. You use the momentum of the old habit to carry the new one.
That's powerful.
And temptation bundling is brilliant. It links an action you want to do with an action you need to do. I will only allow myself to listen to my favorite true crime podcast while I'm sitting down reviewing my monthly budget.
You are literally pairing the dopamine anticipation of the podcast with the painful friction of looking at your expenses.
Exactly. You are artificially manufacturing a craving for a difficult task.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, specifically for breaking the bad habits. If we want to shatter the dopamine loop of impulse spending, we can use a fascinating concept James Clear highlights from the Japanese railway system. It's called pointing and calling.
Oh, this is great. It is one of the most effective yet bizarrely simple safety protocols in the world.
It really is. In Japan, train operators literally point at physical signals and call out their status out loud. They will point at a green light and yell, "Signal is green." They will point at the speedometer on the dashboard and call out the exact speed.
They point at the schedule and announce the time. To an outside observer, it looks completely ridiculous.
But the data proves it works. By engaging the physical body with pointing and the auditory system by speaking, it raises an action from a subconscious, automatic habit to a highly conscious level of awareness. Implementing this system reduces workplace errors by a staggering 85%.
So what if we aggressively apply this to impulse spending? I challenge you listening the next time you are standing in a coffee shop about to tap your phone to buy a $7 iced latte, or you're hovering your mouse over the Buy Now button for a jacket you don't need, force yourself to literally point at the item and say out loud, yes, where other people might hear you, I am buying this item and I am actively, consciously choosing not to invest this money into my future freedom.
The sheer awkwardness of that act is the point. Hearing the long-term consequence spoken aloud makes it viscerally real. It creates a massive speed bump that derails the automatic trance of the dopamine craving.
Exactly, you break the spell. Another speed bump is what our sources call the 1% rule for impulse buying. If an item costs more than 1% of your annual gross income, you mandate a strict 3-day waiting period before you are allowed to purchase it.
Or implement a blanket 24 to 48-hour cooling off period for anything that goes into an online shopping cart.
By simply injecting time into the equation, you allow the neurochemical dopamine spike of anticipation to naturally fade. Once the fog clears, your rational prefrontal cortex can step back into the driver's seat and say, wait a minute, we don't actually need a fourth winter coat.
And if we connect this granular neurobiology to the bigger picture, we can start to look at what happens when you string these successful micro-habits together over the course of an entire day. Because Thomas Corley's Rich Habits study doesn't just look at how people spend money.
Right, it looks at everything.
It gives us a very clear empirical look at exact daily routines of the wealthy compared to the poor. When you look at the data side by side, the disparities in how they manage their time are jarring.
Let's dig deeply into that data, because it is revealing. To set the parameters, Corley defined the wealthy in his study as individuals with a liquid net worth over $3.2 million, and the poor as those with an annual income under $30,000.
And the differences in how these two groups structure their 24 hours are incredible. For instance, let's look at the very beginning of the day. 44% of the wealthy wake up at least 3 hours before their actual workday starts, compared to only 3% of the poor.
Now, they aren't waking up early just to suffer. Why do they do this? Because the early morning is the only quiet time you can truly, absolutely control before the chaos and demands of the world intrude.
It's about securing unfragmented cognitive bandwidth. But simply being awake isn't enough. It's what they do at that time that dictates their trajectory.
Right. What are they doing at 5 a.m.?
Corley found that 88% of the wealthy read for 30 minutes or more every single day, specifically for self-education or career advancement, compared to just 2% of the poor.
That's a massive gap. And the specific content of that reading matters immensely, right?
Completely. They are reading biographies of successful figures, deep history, and self-improvement literature. 63% of them listen to educational audiobooks during their commute.
Instead of just listening to music or the radio?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Only 11% of the wealthy read purely for entertainment. They view information not as a diversion from reality, but as a hard asset to be acquired and deployed.
And conversely, they ruthlessly, almost violently, limit low-value passive input. 67% of the wealthy watch less than 1 hour of television a day. And the type of television matters too. Only 6% of the wealthy watch reality TV compared to 78% of the poor.
We have to unpack the mechanism behind that statistic because it's not just about snobbery, it's about brain chemistry. Consuming highly dramatized reality television literally alters your baseline dopamine expectations and immerses you in a worldview centered on conflict, gossip, and zero-sum status games.
You become what you consume.
Right. Reading a biography of a pioneer, on the other hand, wires your brain to recognize patterns of resilience and long-term strategic thinking. This brings us to a crucial conceptual framework: investing in yourself to build specific knowledge.
Specific knowledge.
The wealthy understand that their greatest wealth-generating engine is not their stock portfolio, it is their own mind. One of the modern financial strategists in our source stack references the philosopher and entrepreneur Naval Ravikant to illustrate this.
Oh, Naval's thought experiment.
Yes, Naval made this famous, provocative point. If you stripped him of all his money, took away his network, and dropped him on a random street corner in any English-speaking city in the world, he would regain his wealth relatively quickly.
I love this thought experiment. Why is he so confident?
Because his true wealth isn't the cash in his bank account. His wealth is the highly specialized, high-demand cognitive skills he has acquired. It's his ability to understand complex systems, his judgment in evaluating venture capital risk, or his ability to rapidly pivot and understand the implications of AI development.
He possesses specific knowledge that society highly values but cannot easily train a replacement to do. You can't mass-produce Naval's judgment.
Exactly. So he isn't getting paid an hourly wage for his time. He's getting paid a massive premium for his judgment. And that judgment was honed by all those early mornings, all those biographies, and all that continuous self-education.
And this daily discipline of learning and self-improvement actively works to eliminate what society commonly mislabels as bad luck. We tend to view bad luck as a random lightning strike from the universe.
Just terrible things happening for no reason.
Right. But Corley's research suggests that a significant portion of what we call bad luck is actually a predictable avalanche caused by an accumulation of negative microhabits over a long period of time.
So true.
If you eat a poor diet, refuse to exercise, don't read to update your skills, and consistently overspend your income, you are mathematically engineered to experience a sudden medical emergency, a sudden job loss due to obsolescence, or a sudden financial crisis.
It looks like bad luck to the untrained eye, but it is simply the compounding interest of bad choices. Conversely, the wealthy create their own good luck by building a broad surface area for serendipity.
Surface area for serendipity, that is a brilliant phrase. And looking at the data, a huge part of expanding that surface area is who you surround yourself with. The habits show that 79% of the wealthy actively network and volunteer 5 or more hours a month.
Compared to what?
Only 10% of those struggling financially do this. I have to imagine this happens because your network is essentially an emergency fund of human capital.
Explain that.
Well, just like cash in a high-yield savings account pays you compound interest, your network pays dividends in the form of serendipitous opportunities, mentorships, and rapid problem solving. If you lose your job and you have a strong, cultivated network, you make 3 phone calls and you have 3 interviews lined up for tomorrow morning.
Right.
If you have a weak network, you are reduced to submitting blind resumes into the algorithmic void of online job boards. A strong network is a massive, invisible, risk-mitigating asset.
That is a profound and highly accurate analogy. Human capital and specific knowledge are the foundation. But eventually, if you execute these daily habits, you will generate an excess of actual, literal capital cash.
And keeping and growing that cash requires understanding 2 fundamental, unyielding mathematical forces, time and risk.
Which brings us to the mechanics of protecting the bag, or as Albert Einstein reportedly called it, the 8th wonder of the world, compound interest.
The famous quote goes, "He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it."
It is the most powerful force in finance, yet the human brain is actually quite terrible at intuitively grasping it. We are biologically wired to think linearly. 1 step equals 1 unit of distance. 2 steps equal 2 units.
But compound interest is exponential.
Right, it's the snowball effect rolling down a very long hill. You own interest on your initial capital, and then crucially, you earn interest on your interest, and then interest on the interest of the interest, creating a parabolic curve of wealth that explodes upward over decades.
The data we pulled from Rathbones illustrates this terrifyingly well, and it shows why procrastination is the most expensive mistake you can make. Let's look at the mathematical difference between starting to invest at age 20 versus age 35 or 45.
Okay, wait up.
If you invest just £5,000 or dollars, the currency doesn't matter, a year starting at age 20, and we assume a historically modest 5% annual growth rate after inflation, by the time you reach age 65, you have a staggering amount of money, well over $800,000.
That's starting at 20.
Yes. But let's say you spend your 20s and 30s ignoring this, and you wait until you are 45 to start investing that exact same $5,000 a year. You execute the exact same habit just later.
What's the result?
You end up with barely over $170,000. You contributed a little more than half the principal of the early starter, but because you lost the exponential compounding time, you end up with less than a quarter of the wealth.
The math is brutal and unforgiving. Time does the heavy lifting, not the principal.
And because time is the single most valuable variable in that equation, protecting the portfolio from catastrophic loss over that long timeline becomes paramount. You cannot let the snowball shatter.
This is where institutional risk management enters the picture, as outlined by our sources at Investment Quorum. You don't just put all your money in one hot tech stock or one cryptocurrency and pray.
You lose it all.
You practice rigorous diversification. You spread your capital across different asset classes. Equities, government bonds, real estate. You diversify geographically across global markets and across different industries.
So if one sector crashes, you're fine.
Exactly. You rebalance your portfolio regularly, selling high and buying low, to ensure you aren't overexposed to a specific sector that just had a massive, unsustainable run-up.
And you build firewalls, a 3 to 6 month emergency fund stored in liquid cash, solid health and property insurance, and proper estate planning.
Firewalls are crucial.
Because what good is an $800,000 portfolio if you are forced to liquidate a massive chunk of it at the exact bottom of a market crash just because you need cash to fix a collapsed roof or cover an unexpected medical bill? You have to insulate the compounding investing engine from the random violent shocks of daily life.
Precisely. You build a moat around your wealth.
But wait, I want to push back on something I noticed in the research here. I see a lot of advice in these sources and in the broader financial world about good debt versus bad debt.
Sure.
But if compound interest is so incredibly powerful, isn't all debt just stealing from your future self? Compound interest is a miracle when you earn it, but it's a nightmare when you are the one paying it to a bank. If our ultimate goal is financial independence, why do wealthy people use debt at all? Why not just pay cash for absolutely everything and carry zero risk?
It's an excellent critical question, and it highlights the difference between how the middle class and the wealthy view leverage. The distinction lies entirely in what the debt is purchasing and the comparative cost of the capital. Wealthy people use debt strategically as leverage to acquire appreciating assets or assets that generate positive cash flow. Let's game out a scenario. Suppose you can borrow $1 million from a bank at a fixed 4% interest rate to buy an apartment building.
Okay, an apartment building.
After all expenses, that building generates an 8% return through rental income and property appreciation. You are essentially capturing a 4% spread, the difference between the return and the cost of debt, on $1 million of money you didn't even own.
Oh, I see.
You are using the bank's money to multiply your returns. That is good debt. It accelerates wealth creation without tying up your own liquid capital.
So it's an arbitrage game.
Exactly. Bad debt, or consumer debt, is borrowing money at 22% interest on a credit card to buy a depreciating asset, like a massive flat-screen television, a luxury vacation, or a car that loses 10% of its value the second you drive it off the lot. In that scenario, the physical item is decaying and losing value every single day, while the debt you owe on it is compounding and growing every single day. The two forces are working against you simultaneously. That is the exact opposite of wealth creation. It is rapid wealth destruction.
You are paying compound interest for the privilege of owning something that is actively decaying.
Right.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The math dictates the strategy. So let me play devil's advocate one more time. If I want to be completely safe, if I don't want to deal with the stress of the stock market crashing or managing rental properties, why don't I just hoard cash?
Hoard it where?
Why don't I just take that 20% savings rate and put my massive emergency fund and my entire retirement into a giant FDIC-insured savings account or a floor safe? Zero risk of market volatility. The number never goes down.
Because of the silent, hidden tax of inflation, and this is a macroeconomic risk management concept that traps millions of conservative savers, saving in pure cash feels incredibly safe because the nominal number, the digits on the screen, never goes down.
Right. 10 grand is 10 grand.
If you have $10,000 in a coffee can, it will still be $10,000 next year.
Right.
But inflation is silently, relentlessly eroding the purchasing power of that cash. If inflation runs at a historical average of 3%, your cash just lost 3% of its actual value in the real world.
It just evaporated.
Exactly. Over a 10 to 20-year horizon, holding pure cash is a mathematically guaranteed catastrophic loss of purchasing power. To beat inflation and preserve the actual real-world value of your wealth, taking on the calculated risk of investing in diversified equities or appreciating assets is not just an optional strategy for aggressive people. It is a mathematical requirement for survival.
Okay, so let's synthesize all of this. Let's say you listening take everything we've talked about and execute it flawlessly. You shift your deep internal identity from a consumer to a creator. You embrace the stealth wealth mindset and drive the used F-150. You build the neuro-hacked micro-habit.
You wake up early, read biographies, build specific knowledge, invest early and consistently, manage your risk, utilize good debt, and let compound interest perform its exponential magic.
You win the game. You build a massive bag of wealth. But as we move toward the end of our deep dive, we have to look at the dark side of wealth. Because ironically, the very act of accumulating that capital introduces a completely new psychological threat. Not to yourself, but to your children.
This is huge.
How you pass this wealth to the next generation can actively, violently destroy the very psychological habits you worked your entire life to build.
This raises an important question, perhaps the most difficult, emotionally fraught question in personal finance. How do you raise productive, grounded, ambitious children when you have abundant resources and can easily afford to solve all their problems?
It's so hard.
The Millionaire Next Door introduces a concept that is absolutely devastating in its clarity, and it's called economic outpatient care, or EOC.
Economic outpatient care. It sounds so clinical, almost medical, but the reality of it is incredibly toxic to a family's financial legacy. EOC is defined as the economic gifts, cash handouts, fully funded trust funds, and regular allowances that wealthy parents give to their adult children.
We aren't talking about paying for a teenager's high school math tutor.
No, we are talking about paying the down payment on the 30-year-old's house, buying them a new car every 5 years, and constantly bailing out their credit card debt. And the parents always think they're doing the right thing. They think they're giving their kids a crucial leg up in a tough economy. But the data shows the exact opposite occurs.
The demographic data is truly startling, and it serves as a massive warning. Adult children who receive significant EOC become, almost uniformly, high-volume consumers and chronic underachievers.
Really?
Yes. When researchers compared adult children in the exact same income brackets, one group receiving EOC and one group receiving zero financial help from their parents, the group receiving handouts invested far less of their own earned money.
So they weren't building any habits.
They saved significantly less. They relied far more heavily on credit to fund their lifestyle, and their overall net worth was mathematically significantly lower than their peers who received nothing.
I have to imagine that happens because it is fundamentally psychologically easier to spend someone else's money than your own. Am I on the right track? Like, why is the instinct to save totally obliterated when the money is gifted?
You are exactly on the right track. It's rooted in the psychology of labor and value assignment. When you earn a dollar through your own blood, sweat, and tears, when you trade hours of your finite life to acquire it, you naturally treat it with immense respect.
Because you remember the pain of earning it.
Right. You understand its precise value because you have physically experienced the caloric, emotional, and temporal cost required to generate it. You know what that dollar represents.
But when it's handed to you.
When you are simply handed a dollar, it has no psychological weight. It is untethered from labor. It burns a hole in your pocket. Unearned money fuels rapid consumption, not accumulation, because the recipient hasn't built the internal systems required to respect it.
It's the ultimate identity conflict playing out across generations. The parent built an identity of frugality, intense hard work, and delayed gratification to build the wealth. But the kid, receiving constant EOC, builds an identity of consumption, entitlement, and dependency.
They learned very efficiently how to spend wealth, but they are utterly deprived of the friction required to learn the systems of generating it.
Which is why Stanley and Danko lay out very strict, almost counterintuitive rules for affluent parents. First, never let your children know how wealthy you are until they are mature, established adults with their own independent careers.
If they think the family safety net is infinite and totally soft, they will never learn to walk the tightrope of a career.
Second, teach frugality by example, not just by lecturing. Third, never use cash to negotiate with adult children. Do not bribe them to visit for the holidays or to behave a certain way, as it completely warps their relationship with money and family.
And finally, praise their achievements, praise their hard work, and praise their resilience in the face of failure. Never praise symbols of success or status items.
You know what it perfectly reminds me of? It's like the classic story of the butterfly and the chrysalis. A man is walking in the woods and he finds a butterfly trying to emerge from its cocoon. It's struggling violently, fighting for hours to push its body through this tiny restrictive hole.
The struggle is part of the process.
Exactly. But the man, wanting to be kind, feeling empathy for the creature, takes a small pair of scissors and carefully snips the cocoon open so the butterfly can just step right out without the struggle.
But the butterfly can't fly.
Right. It comes out easily, but its body is swollen and its wings are completely shriveled and useless. What the well-meaning man didn't understand about biology was that the intense struggle to break through the friction of the cocoon was nature's required mechanism for forcing fluid from the butterfly's body out into its wings.
Without the painful struggle, the wings never develop the structural strength required to take flight.
Giving excessive economic outpatient care to your kids is snipping the cocoon. It seems deeply kind, it feels loving in the moment to write the check, but you are actively robbing them of the necessary friction and struggle that builds the psychological strength to survive and thrive on their own. They ultimately perish, financially speaking, when the parents are no longer around to fund their artificial flight.
It is a profound tragedy, and it perfectly encapsulates the entire theme of our discussion today. It highlights how deeply, inextricably intertwined our financial outcomes are with our psychological development and our behavioral habits. You cannot separate the math from the mind.
You really can't. Wow. Okay, we have covered an immense, sweeping amount of ground today. Let's briefly retrace the journey for you listening so you can lock this framework into place.
Let's recap.
We started at the very core of human behavior, looking at how to shift your fundamental identity from a passive consumer to a disciplined creator and saver. We shattered the illusion of the flashy millionaire and embraced the hidden, mathematically superior frugality of the millionaire next door.
The used F-150, the middle-class neighborhood, the power of unrealized gains, and buy, borrow, die.
We learned how to wire our brains with the architecture of microhabits, utilizing dopamine loops, habit stacking, and the bizarre but effective pointing and calling method. We explored the specific, aggressive daily routines of the wealthy.
Waking hours early, reading to build highly specific knowledge, and expanding our surface area for serendipity.
We weaponized the brutal math of compound interest and institutional risk management. And finally, we learned how to protect the next generation from the crippling, well-intentioned trap of economic outpatient care.
It is a complete end-to-end behavioral blueprint for financial independence.
It is. But I want to leave you listening with one final, lingering thought to deeply mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We spend so much time in this society talking about the mechanics of how to acquire wealth. We track the stock market tickers, we clip coupons, we negotiate raises, we stress over interest rates.
That's it.
But consider this. What if the ultimate luxury that wealth buys isn't a physical object at all? What if it isn't a massive house or a designer wardrobe or a luxury car to show off to strangers at a red light? What if the absolute greatest thing money can buy is simply the cognitive bandwidth to not have to think about money ever again?
That is a beautiful thought.
Imagine what you could build, what art you could create, who you could help, and what your ultimate purpose could be if the mental real estate currently occupied by financial stress, by rent anxiety, by credit card panic was entirely, permanently freed up. What relationships would you deepen if you weren't exhausted by financial friction? That profound peace of mind, that ultimate freedom of attention to focus on what actually matters to you, that is what these invisible habits are actually buying you. That is the real prize. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take that first step, find your 1% action today, point and call out your choices, and we'll see you next time.